Okay, today we're going to cover, first off, I want to provide to you a framework that not everybody understands. And if you have to retain one piece of information, would be this first slide. Then we're going to level knowledge here about E2 visa requirements. We're going to talk about 4 possible investment vehicles for E2 visa, franchise advantage, the ideal ownership model for E2 visa. We're going to talk how to invest less for E2 visa. Most of you are coming from countries with unfavorable foreign exchange rates to dollars, so every dollar counts. Our rockstar guest speaker here, Bianca Patrick, is going to talk a little bit about her journey. And then we're going to open for discussion here if it's a good time to pursue E2 visa. We have a couple of hot topics to cover in that slide as well. So first thing I wanted to bring to your attention is everybody thinks about, buying the right business opportunity. That's kind of a given when you consider E2 visa investment. And if you're considering franchise investment, we at Franchise Wizards, we can assist you with that. But there are 2 other major components of the framework that most people ignore. And I wanted to bring this to your attention. So the right level of business implementation is also very important because as Attorney Chung is going to cover in the next slide, the E2 visa requires the investment to be made first, and the E2 visa needs to be requested second. So how far should you implement your new business is very important. There are a lot of small details that for people looking into E2 visa for the first time, they don't even know it could be a problem, which entity to form, which legal entity to form, how to enter the country to implement the business, how to move money into the country, what to say at the border, so you don't jeopardize your visa application. That's why I always recommend any client that works with us to retain a competent immigration attorney prior to deploying the plan. Okay, it's okay to start with me discussing franchise opportunities, but before pulling the trigger, you should be assisted by an immigration attorney so you don't so you can have approval at the first attempt and don't have to do multiple trips to the United States. So everything can be much smoother if you engage the services of an immigration attorney ahead of time. Attorney Chung has extreme experience here with investment visas and franchising. If you mention his name to any franchisor, chances are they know Attorney Chung. The third component here, not less important for this, you must present a credible and complete visa application. This is another area in which immigration attorney is of fundamental importance for everything to go well smoothly. Later on, we're going to talk more about credibility of the business plan, but I'm sure there are several forms that need to be filled out, evidences of money being deployed for the business implementation. There are a lot of details here that immigration attorney can help you with. So for the next slide, I'd like to level the knowledge about E2 visa requirements. Attorney Chung, would you mind presenting this slide?
Absolutely, it'd be my pleasure. Thank you for that introduction, Daniel. Hello, everybody. I'm excited to present to you E2 visa requirements to maximize your probability of E2 visa approval. Now, one of the biggest concerns or fear factor of E2 visa process, as some of you may know already, is that the US government requires you to invest your money first before you can apply for the E2 visa. So God forbid if the visa is denied, then it's a real financial risk given that the investment has already been made. But the reality is not that risky, not that scary. And the reason is that if you do everything right from beginning to end, based on following the guidance of an expert E2 visa lawyer, your probability of success of E2 visa approval should be very, very high. It's not the same as going to Las Vegas and gambling your money on a roulette table. For my firm, our probability of success for clients that follow our guidance from beginning to end, we have 95% E2 visa success rate. And even in the worst case scenario, should the visa be denied because you have bad luck of getting overly strict visa officer, the recourse is that you are allowed to reapply for E2 visa. And as long as you can satisfy the reason for the prior refusal, you can still get a win, get an approval on a second attempt. But nevertheless, if you do everything right from the beginning, A to Z, your probability of visa approval will be very high. And hopefully that puts you a little bit more at ease. Now, I'm going to share with you 3 key concepts that you should be aware at the very beginning of this journey to maximize your probability of approval. Because doing everything right, the right way, properly, step by step from beginning to end, will result in that very high probability of visa approval based on my decades of experience. 3 key concepts that I want you all to be aware of and think about in your planning process for the E2 visa journey. Number 1 is, what is the right investment amount for your investment, for your business venture? Number 2 is, what is the qualifying source of your investment money? That will be scrutinized, that will need to be verified. Number 3 is, what is the right business for your investment, given your investment budget? So we'll talk about what is the right investment amount. Well, with the E2 visa, that's a little bit ambiguous because the law doesn't say how much. So that means a smaller investment could potentially qualify. In my 2 decades of experience, I've actually got an approval for $35,000 investment for E2 visa case. But the reality is that's not a good idea. Where the investment falls below 100,000, immigration officer can naturally be more skeptical about the viability of the business. As a result, for a strong case, for a good presentation, I typically recommend at least $100,000 investment budget. It's easier for immigration to believe in the potential success where the investment is at least 6 figures. So we're going for high probability success here. Higher investment amount, of course, the stronger your case becomes. Ideally, 150,000 or more is my recommended investment budget. Now, equally important is demonstrating the qualifying source of your investment money. U.S. immigration is not going to be happy with the case, even if the business is great, even if the investment amount is great, but they're not happy with the origin of the money. So you need to think about the source of your money from the beginning, how you're going to demonstrate the source, qualifying source to the immigration officials, and do you have the documentation to satisfy immigration officials? 2 things that U.S. immigration cares about in scrutinizing, examining the source of funds is, number 1, how did an applicant lawfully acquire the money? Number 2 is the trail of the money completely traceable from the lawful origin all the way to the applicant's possession and then to the U.S. business? Now, source of money can come from a variety of qualifying sources, including personal savings from employment or business income. A lot of people sell their houses or assets to fund their investment. Some people get a loan or gift from family members. That could all potentially qualify with conditions, such as, for example, if you get a loan, personal loan from friend or family or a gift, you also have to demonstrate the donor or the lender's financial ability and qualifying source. So if that's going to be a source of funds, for example, one of the first things we need to ascertain is making sure the donor or the lender has the documentation to prove his or her lawful source of fund and also consents to sharing with us those financial evidence so we can present it to immigration that the origin of money is lawful. So that's an example of the type of things that we need to think about in the beginning to ensure that by the time you go down this path and you reach the point where you're ready to invest the money, we've already done our financial due diligence to feel confident that the money you're going to be using is going to satisfy immigration. Last thing you want to do is find out at that point in time that the money is risky or not satisfactory, and you have to start all over at raising new funding. Lastly, last thing I want you to think about is the right business model. Now, U.S. immigration, they're looking at a business model that will create jobs, that will make an impact on the U.S. economy, and a credible business model that has a reasonable probability of success. So there are people that invest and start up their own independent business. There are people that buy franchise businesses. And the foundational commonality is the business credible and successful? Now, if you have a lot of business experience in a particular industry in your home country, and you plan on doing replicating the same business in the United States, then an independent startup could be a viable option for you. But if you are going into a new industry or you are new to entrepreneurship and you don't have the kind of entrepreneurial background track record to show immigration, then it behooves you to seriously consider franchise investment, because you can compensate for that lack of business qualification background with a franchise brand recognition and brand credibility, and a brand and business model that by its nature will create jobs. And these are important because immigration officers looking at these factors and deciding whether or not to take that leap of faith and trust in the potential success. Because all E2 applicants have to present a business plan. And of course, naturally, every E2 applicant is going to paint a rosy picture in the business plan. And having been doing this a long time, I know immigration officers are kind of skeptical on the potential, on what is projected and presented in business plan, because it's always a rosy picture. So they're looking at objective credibility factors, such as the success of the franchise brand, how long they've been around, are their franchisees doing well? Clause 19 in the franchise disclosure documents could present successful, strong, average financial performance of franchisee. That's an example of a credibility booster that will give you a higher probability E2 visa approval. So these are the three common factors. There's a lot more to think about, but as a starting point in the beginning of the E2 visa journey, I'd like the audience to think about these three key factors. Number one is, what is the investment amount that is necessary for the type of business I want to invest in? And typical recommendation is that you should have at least $100,000 investment amount for a good E2 presentation. Number two is, what is the source of my investment money? And do I have clear documentation and evidence to prove and satisfy immigration on the lawful origin and the trail of the money? And sometimes it is necessary or very, very beneficial to consult an expert immigration lawyer in the E2 visa field to guide you on raising the investment funds from qualifying source. You may have a variety of sources to choose from, but there are sources that are going to be easier for you to prove. So it's important to know that in advance, what are the sources that are the easier for you to satisfy immigration, and make that determination in advance. And lastly, the type of business to choose for your E2 investment, whether it is a young startup because you have significant success track record in that industry, or you're a new entrepreneur, or you go into a new industry where a franchise investment with a strong established brand makes the most sense for your E2 investment. All right, well, that summarizes my introduction of the E2 visa requirement. Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Daniel.
All right, so good segue here. The four possible investment vehicles, as Attorney Chung mentioned, it's either independently owned businesses versus franchise business models, franchise businesses, and it can be an acquisition of an existing operation, or you can start up a new operation. So for each one of those combinations, there are pros and cons. Attorney Chung has mentioned a few. For example, if you are going for independently owned businesses, being able to capitalize on your previous business experience or specific industry experience may strengthen your case. For franchise businesses, on the other hand, you have training, support, is a proven business model. You may be able to tap onto the proven business model to be able to succeed here in the United States. Another thing that is very important, we're going to talk more about the franchise advantage in the next slide here, but is access to data. And I wanted to bring to your attention a common risk that I see when people tell me that they're looking for existing businesses for sale. I remarked here that's not always available or suitable. Again, we're talking here about the best case scenario for a strong presentation. Ideally, your business, if you're looking to acquire an existing operation, should be profitable, should have clean books, and the seller must be willing to provide solid financial information so your immigration attorney can use that information and strengthen the business case. That's not always available, especially with low-cost resales. I see a lot of businesses up to $125,000 most of those businesses are not profitable or have marginal profitability. So why is that a problem? Because that creates additional complexity to your case. A couple of other things that I wanted to bring to your attention is, but first off, why can I say something like that? Why most businesses under $125,000 are not profitable? It has to do with valuation methods, right? So whenever a seller is willing to sell their business, they need to form an asking price. There are different methodologies. The most common one for a business that is cash flowing is the free cash flow method, where they will apply a certain multiplier to the free cash flow, and that will determine the reasonable asking price. For each type of business model, for each type of industry, the multipliers are different. For most owner-operated transactional revenue businesses, they tend to sell for 2 to 3 times the cash flow, but it may be different depending on the nature of the business and depending on the industry as well. But what happens when a business is underperforming, is not cash flow or marginal profitability or even bleeding money? Then the valuation by cash flow doesn't work. So they go for the second best methodology, which would be the residual asset value. So they will form an asking price that should cover the residual asset value. That's why you see a lot of business for sale disguised as asset sales online. And this is a very, very discreet way of telling you, don't ask for financial information. You're not buying the company, you are buying the assets of a company. And again, not having access to previous financial performance will not help your case. It will be more difficult. So for anyone here who is in that $100,000 to $125,000 budget, comfortable budget, we should be looking into new franchises. That's where you're going to see the vast majority of opportunities out there. As one of the difficulties of any new enterprise is that you start with no or low revenues, right? And here franchising has an advantage of having established marketing programs that are designed to help you ramp up faster than if you had to reinvent the wheel and create your own processes, your own marketing strategies by yourself. Any additional comments, Attorney Chung?
All very good, valid points on all of these. And the chart is very informative and true for most people. The most popular type of E2 investment model I've seen in recent time is the new startup franchise model. And there are many advantages to this choice because there's the greatest selection of territories. And you are also in much greater control when it's a new startup business versus an existing business. The reason buying an existing business could potentially present for E2 visa is that you're dealing with a seller. And the seller may or may not be knowledgeable about E2 visa, and they may or may not fully cooperate with the waiting time for an E2 visa, as well as providing all the type of tax, financial, and business records that we need for the E2 visa. Basically, in my years of experience, when you're dealing with a seller, it's a bit of a crapshoot. If you get a good seller, fantastic. But a lot of times the sellers, they don't really know or care much about E2 visa, and they put up an obstacle, and then we become at the mercy of the cooperation of the seller. And that oftentimes delays the case and potentially jeopardizes the case if the seller ends up declining to cooperate and furnish the documents that we need. Also, when you're dealing with existing business, if it's a brick and mortar, we also have to deal with the landlord. And we have to secure a lease assignment or a new lease with a landlord. And not all landlords are familiar with E2 visa, and not all landlords are accustomed to dealing with international tenants who doesn't have a credit history in the US. That presents also a challenging obstacle to get the lease signed for the E2 applicant before getting the E2 visa, because we have to present that as part of the existing business purchase a lot of times. So oftentimes it ends up the most viable option is the startup franchise type of business investment model. I would say that constitutes a great majority. And then, you know, the independent type, like Daniel has mentioned, it is really reserved for folks that have already a proven track record. Otherwise, it creates tremendous doubt in the minds of the immigration officials, thereby jeopardizing the chances of E2 visa approval. All right.
Thank you, Bobby. I want to add one more thing that is often, you know, it's another risk that is often overlooked by you know, clients that we see they are interested in buying resales of existing operations. They infer that the asking price is the total investment. So let's look at this. If you are buying a business that has marginal profitability, best case scenario, it's expected that you're going to end up to invest in additional funds to bring that business to the level that you want. I'm not even talking about potential for deferred maintenance that is overlooked because, again, most foreign nationals do not engage the service of maybe a CPA, a forensic analyst, CPA to look at if there's any skeleton in that particular business model before making an investment. So there are deferred maintenance, there is additional capital to bring the business current. So please don't fall into the trap of thinking that the existing, actually the asking price for the business is going to be your total investment. That's a big risk, often overlooked by foreign nationals considering business ownership here in the United States. So as we talked before, franchise advantages, and I want to cover this from two angles, from the business standpoint, as well as from the E2 visa application standpoint. When you go for a franchise business, you follow a roadmap to implement and ramp up the business. You know the initial costs and operating costs. Franchise sales in the United States are highly regulated by Federal Trade Commission. And during the franchise discovery process, which is a structured process to take you from where you are today and educate you in every aspect of the business so you can make an informed investment decision at the end of this process, you're going to be given access to a federally regulated document called franchise disclosure document. That document is the X-ray of the franchise offering. So your initial cost, several of the fees associated with that franchise are also included in this document. Reference of revenues, as Attorney Chung has mentioned before, are published on item 19 or chapter 19 of this document. The structure of this document is standardized. So if you are comparing 2 or 3 franchise opportunities, sometimes in different industries, because the information is presented to you in the same sequence, now you can compare apples to bananas. Economies of scale, especially with mature systems, large franchisors, they act as a procurement group. Chances are they buy everything cheaper or at better terms than an independent player doing that individually in the same industry. Next point here for me is one of the most important values of franchising for someone, you know, coming to the United States and investing here for the first time, or someone without significant experience in business ownership, is establish marketing programs that have been developed and perfected by the franchisor over time. So you can hit the ground running with established marketing programs. I would love Bianca to talk a little bit about this when we get to your case here. Was incredible when I called Bianca a couple of weeks ago to invite her to this webinar. We had a quick Zoom call, and within 10 or 15 minutes, her phone rang like 3 times with leads asking for information about her products and services. So that's kind of a testament for how well the established marketing programs can be. Initial training and continuous support. This is very interesting because that would allow somebody with not enough business ownership experience to be in business, and the immigration can look at that and make sure that training is in place, so that increases the success of that particular applicant to run a good business here in the United States, profitable business in the United States, and also allows people to switch industries. Most franchisors don't require previous industry specific knowledge. They are looking for transferable skills if someone has general knowledge of business ownership, how money flows in and out of a business, and that's what they are looking for. They will train you on the technical aspect of the business. They will train you on how to manage that particular business. And this is all documented in that same document I mentioned before, the franchise disclosure document. The access to data that is not a catch-all industry averages. No, this is data about that particular business model that you are evaluating. It's under your consideration to make an investment. It's very credible, benchmark that can be used for you to present a credible business plan to immigration. Any additional comments, Chung?
Thank you, Daniel. Absolutely. From the E2 investor visa point of view, franchise investment definitely has distinct advantages. Number one is, for most E2 visa applicants, you have to have a face-to-face interview with a visa officer at the U.S. Embassy in your home country. And the performance of the interview is a critical factor in the visa decision. Now, what I found from many years of specializing E2 visa is that clients who have gone through the franchise training before the interview are much more confident, knowledgeable, and able to communicate about the business in a very professional and detailed manner in a way that impresses the visa officer. Then, of course, results in a much higher probability of E2 visa approval. Even folks that don't have a lot of business background, that kind of support and training that is gained before the visa interview gives the applicant tremendous advantage at the E2 visa interview stage. And in addition, as I mentioned earlier, the immigration officer oftentimes are looking at the credibility and the probability of success of the business presented in the E2 visa application. With a franchise investment, and you look at the FDD, franchise disclosure document, there's several elements that contribute to that higher E2 visa probability. Number one is what I mentioned earlier, clause 19, where if the franchisor shares strong average franchisee performance, that's a big advantage for E2 visa success. Number two is clause 20, which shows the growth rate of the franchise brand, where if the franchise brand is experiencing strong growth rate, that's a validation of the business model. People are not going to invest in a brand unless they feel pretty good about it, feel pretty confident about it. Same thing with the immigration officer, when they see that strong growth trajectory of the franchise brand, it's a validation of the high probability of success of that franchise business model. And lastly, under the FDD clause 7, you have an illustration of the recommended investment amount and a layout of how the investment amount will be expended to start up this kind of business. That's also very helpful and advantageous for the immigration official, because they're trying to determine if your investment amount is adequate and appropriate, and are you spending it in the right categories. That's critical for E2 visa success, because without a franchise, basically you're presenting that with no validation. An immigration officer basically has to trust your presentation on face value. With a franchise investment, clause 7, it's a validation corroboration of everything you've done to establish the franchise business, because it's according to the recommendation of the franchisor. That all adds together to have a stronger E2 visa case. That's why my franchise E2 visa cases tend to have the easiest visa interview in most cases, because of these advantages that I've just illustrated. Daniel?
I was on mute here. Thank you for the additional information, Attorney Chung. Let's talk about the ideal ownership model for E2 visa. We talked before that, the ideal business model should show your ability and intention to hire US workers. The lowest cost that we can find in those characteristics is what we call executive business model. From the three possible roles, you are the owner, you are the manager, but you are hiring the technicians, you're hiring the employees, okay? If you have a larger budget and wants to aim for semi-absentee ownership, from the three opportunities here, from the three roles, you are the owner, but you're hiring the manager and hiring the technician. That helps a lot with showing that your business can have a positive impact to the U.S. economy. The other thing that is interesting as well is job creation is tangible. Is something that the administration can brag themselves as they did. There is an article that was sent to me a couple of days ago from CNN that U.S. has created 537,000 new jobs in January against 185,000 jobs that were estimated. So created way more jobs than it was anticipated. So this is material that immigration can, the administration can brag about, and helps align the interest between you, the U.S. government, and makes it much easier for you to get approved the first attempt. Any additional comments?
Yes, just a brief comment.
Sure.
The executive model really aligns best for E2 visa qualification, in that E2 visa expects the applicant to personally manage and operate the business, as well as create at least a few jobs for American workers. So executive model perfectly aligns with that by demonstrating that the applicant will personally be managing the business, but the applicant, E2 applicant, is not going to be the service provider. The applicant is going to hire the American staff to deliver the services or products of the business to the end customers. So that really is the ideal. Now, of course, after you get the E2 visa and the business continue to grow and does well, you can certainly graduate and elevate to the semi-absentee, where you're the owner and you're the strategic decision maker, overseer, and delegate some of the lower level managerial duty to an employee manager. But in terms of applying for the E2 visa, executive is the best model for the strongest E2 visa case. Owner operator could be problematic, because if the immigration officer believes that the E2 applicant may be the service provider, then that's going to conflict with the job creation requirement. And in the owner operated business model, I have to advise the client further on modifying it so that we don't give the misimpression that the E2 applicant is going to be the painter or caretaker or the tutor, but just the manager.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel?
Great point. And in fact, most of you probably seen on the internet that there is a magic number of $100,000. That's not in the requirements. That's a general recommendation. But that $100,000 initial investment level is where most of executive business models start, and it's from their level and up. That's why not only Attorney Chung, but a lot of immigration attorneys will recommend sticking with at least 6 figures. Let me prove that to you. If you were to hire a very cheap employee at $15 an hour, times 40 hours a week, times 52 weeks in a year, let's put another 10% to cover some of the payroll taxes. That one cheap employee costs the business owner $34,000 per year. So you see why a $50,000 business cannot be run as executive from the get-go. It would be run as an owner-operated, and eventually achieving executive status later on in the process. So not ideal for E2 visa. All right, so a lot of you are coming from countries in which your local currency is worth less than the dollar, the US dollar. So it's this unfavorable foreign exchange rate is a reality, and I'm sensitive to the fact. So I like to teach people how to invest less. I have asked this question probably 6,000 times in my career, what's the first American franchise brand name that comes to your mind? And most of the answers are around quick service restaurants, convenience store, liquor store, hair salons, fitness centers. What all those businesses have in common, they have the same growth drivers. Doesn't matter if they are selling different products or service. All those businesses, they will sit here on the interface. They are location-driven businesses, meaning you need a storefront. And because you need a storefront, you need to spend money in leasehold improvements, furniture, fixture, equipment, paying a contractor to assemble everything together. Nothing wrong with this business model, but this is the most expensive setting usually. Okay, so if we drew a line here and had your attention to the bottom part of this chart, there are businesses that do not rely on a retail location to find success. Those businesses can be operated from a small office space, an office warehouse, not premium real estate by any means, and most important, no or minimum leasehold improvements. That's what drives the initial cost down. If you guys are interested in franchising, we end up connecting after this webinar. We're gonna look into this from the scalability standpoint as well, use of efficient use of the money as well. There are different angles that may create a very good traction for businesses here that don't rely on their physical location to excite customers to come forward. They excite customers by a combination of advertisement and or relationship building with influencers or concentrators of business. An additional comment, Bobby?
Absolutely. This is a really important point. I hope the audience pays close attention to this point. Beyond all the great advice by Daniel, physical location, although is definitely viable for E2 visa, it creates a lot of complications, and complications are not good in a sense that most E2 investors are not US residents, don't have a US credit history, don't have a social security number. When you're renting a retail location, oftentimes the landlord will require that credit history, that social security number before agreeing to rent to the foreign citizen. So sometimes even finding a landlord willing to rent to a non-resident foreign citizen is a difficulty. Number two is retail location build-out usually drags out the E2 visa process enormously because we have to demonstrate the business is set up ready to open at very minimum before we're allowed to apply for E2 visa. If the business model requires a build out retail location, meaning you have to hire the contractors, architects to build out the location, however long that might take before we can apply for E2 visa. In addition, oftentimes local government authorities will require permits, licenses, registrations, and they can take forever to get that. In fact, sometimes some of the permit licenses for retail type of business models may require the person to have a social security number or residency in the US before the local city, county, or state government willing to issue those licenses. These are the kind of complications that we run into with retail location type of business model. And oftentimes in that type of situation, my client would have to secure a US business partner to help with securing the licenses and permits and all those compliance issues. Whereas if you invest in a business model that could be run out of a simple office space, then the leasehold is much easier to secure because the landlord in that type of office space is usually a lot more lenient and the leases are much shorter and there's no build out. So the time from investment to the time of applying for a visa is drastically reduced. Now, if you're, passionate or determined to do a retail location type of business, that's certainly doable. But I do want the audience to understand the distinction and the time advantages of a non-retail location type of business for E2 investment. Daniel?
Excellent points. Thank you very much for bringing the timeline point of view here for this discussion. The other thing is important here, as mentioned, as Attorney Chung has just mentioned, if someone is really passionate about a location-driven model, we're gonna find opportunities, okay? And there are certain instances in which the location-driven business may be adequate. So, for example, if I'm dealing with a candidate in which the English proficiency is not at commercial level, so it's much easier to run a coffee shop that is order taking than a business in the service industry that requires intensive communication. So that could be one of the factors that we will look at on a case-by-case basis. The other thing, still related to not having credit history in the United States, a landlord may require additional security deposit, the additional months of security deposit. So in lieu of having a solid credit history in the United States. So then when you start evaluating your business on a cash-on-cash return, because you had to park additional money in the form of security deposit, you're gonna figure out that that's not the most efficient use of money that you could have with a service-based business operated from a small office or office warehouse. Excellent. I'd like to invite our rock star of the hour here, Bianca Petri. Bianca, thank you very much for joining us today. Bianca has worked first with us at Franchise Wizards. We looked into several franchise opportunities for her. Later, she retained immigration attorney Bobby Chung. She's one of our recent cases of success, and we would appreciate if you could share a little bit about your journey, your motivation, any challenges. We know it's an endeavor to move your family from another country here, start a business, and any advice you can share with the audience here. I want to point out this is a super nice picture from Franchise Dictionary magazine that featured Bianca and her Four Covers International franchise, this recent issue here. I was so happy to see you here. Please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me during this webinar. It really means a lot to me to be here because I do want to share my experience. We just went through the process, and I wish there was something like this when I was going through, because it would have helped a lot. But I do want to start by telling the audience a little bit about myself. So we both, myself and my mom, we were the primary applicants. We moved to Florida from freezing Canada and Toronto. So we wanted to live the lifestyle where we could enjoy the weather. In Canada, I worked as a high school teacher, but also as a real estate agent. My husband had a renovation company up there. So when we started the process, really, we were looking at building a legacy for our family. It felt that no matter what we were doing, we were stuck. So I've always dreamt of proving myself. And also I always dreamt of kind of being in an HGTV show. So it was, it was all these things. And then we started looking into franchising because, as Daniel said, moving to another country can be very difficult. You don't know anyone. You don't know where to start. You don't know where to begin. So the franchise really offers you that plan that you can follow step by step and the support that you need as a newcomer. We originally moved from Romania to Canada, so we had done that before, but with no support. So we knew how important it was for us to be able to be part of a franchise because we wanted to kind of have a set guideline of what were the expectations from us and what were the expectations from the franchise. So that's how we decided to look at the franchise route. And I guess it was fate that one Sunday afternoon, while Googling franchises, I saw Daniel's website and booked an appointment and started working with you, Daniel. As you remember, we looked at different options, and you were so amazing trying to explain all this process and really trying to find the best fit for us. And while that was an immense help, and this is an advice that I would give everyone, talk with the, if you're interested in opening a franchise, talk with the franchisors. You have to know exactly what they do, how they do it. You're going to rely on their support every step of the way. There's no ifs or buts about it. So make sure that the franchise that you choose is a good fit. I felt that with Floor Coverings International from the get-go. First because it was in an area that appealed to who I am as a person. Second, because I kind of saw myself going into people's homes and, running my own HGTV show, so to speak. And thirdly, because I think that their level of support was unparalleled compared to other franchisees and franchisors that I looked into. So definitely that is very, very important. And that helps with the visa process. That helps with, as Daniel mentioned, marketing. You cannot open a business if you don't invest in marketing. And without a set plan, you wouldn't know where to start and where to begin. Also, in my journey, Attorney Chung has been amazing. So I'm a planner. Everyone that knows me knows that I'm a planner, and Attorney Chung offered that plan for me very, very clearly. So it's the same as with the franchise. You buy into the franchise, you buy into the actual product that it's going to work. It's like someone said, you pay money and might as well do what they tell you to do. You kind of drink the Kool-Aid, do it. And it's the same. That's how I felt with Attorney Chung. He was very, very, every step of the way, every step was itemized. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew how to get there. If I ever had questions, the team was amazing. And, I called many times because as much as I'm a planner, I'm also an overachiever. So I try to go above and beyond all the advice and this was because I wanted to maximize our chances of getting our E2, and I didn't want to make any mistakes along the way, and I wanted everything to be perfect. Any advice that I could give potential E2 candidates? Please, please, please listen to your attorney. Make sure that you make the best informed decisions. Make sure that you do your due diligence when it comes to the business plan that you want to follow. For me, it was a franchise. It worked out. It was as detailed as I wanted it to be. Everyone's different, but make sure you ask those questions and make sure that you follow the advice of other people that have walked the walk. Because if you start doing things, I'm just going to do something on my own, chances are, they're not going to work all the time. So yeah, that's really it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Bianca, for walking us through your journey here. Let me just complement something that you just said. Whenever someone is considering franchising, is evaluating a franchise opportunity, there is a structured process in place. You're going to first have a few discovery calls with the franchisor. They will break down the business model for you in more manageable pieces, educate you about the economics of the business. They then have to give you access to the franchise disclosure document. That's the federally regulated document I was talking about. That's the X-ray of the franchise offering. And you can ask to speak with existing franchisees of the system. Is this what we call validation calls? pick their brains, ask them tough
Yeah.
questions. Let me tell you, they will tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. They're gonna tell you about a good day in a life, a bad day in a life, if they are achieving their goals, if the franchisor is supportive, and it's a very important step. Not everybody, does that, but it's available for you.
That's
Chung,
very
Bianca, that was an amazing experience share. Thank you so much. I think your experience share really has tremendous value to audience here, because everybody's here are about to embark upon this journey, and to hear from someone who's just been through this journey and have a successful outcome is extremely inspiring and gives people hope. I just also want to compliment you that the reason for the successful outcome in your case is largely due to your credit. An attorney can provide advice and guidance, but it's a partnership collaboration with the client. And the successful implementation is dependent on the client's cooperation. What Bianca did that allowed for a smooth, successful outcome was she allowed me as her attorney opportunity to guide her from beginning to end. And it felt like we were on the same team from beginning to end. And she followed my advice, implemented, asked great questions, and we were able to collaborate as teammates from beginning to end. A client that has already begun investment, where I come in midpoint and have to backtrack and determine if things were done right with the source of funds, with fund transfer, with the business selection. Sometimes we run into a situation where I'm in damage control, where I discover some things that were done not ideally, or sometimes done wrong, where I cannot unrung that bell, and I'm in damage control. And in our case, E2 visa case, and potential success is jeopardized. So I'm always feeling grateful for the clients that give me the opportunity to guide from zero all the way to the end. And that's where I, as attorney, feel the most confident about our probability of success. So thank you, Bianca, for being such an amazing client to me.
Thank you so much, Attorney Chung. It was an absolute pleasure.
all right. And just to second something that Attorney Chung just mentioned, that's why I was advising you guys to retain your immigration attorney before you start deploying your plan. Prior to deploying your plan, prior to entering the United States, prior to moving money to the United States, prior to forming a legal entity. Be mindful that there are details you don't know about that could jeopardize your visa case. So you don't need to do that by yourself. There's a professional like Attorney Chung that can guide you through this process, so you do it right the first time. Thank you very much, Bianca, for your story here. Really appreciate it. And congratulations again in all the success. You didn't mention that, but I'm going to say you got an award from the franchise. How long have you been in the franchise?
We started officially on October 1st. So
Okay.
it's been 4 months.
All right.
Yeah, so it's quite amazing. We've accomplished a lot, and we're living the dream, so to speak. Yeah.
Glad to hear. Congratulations again.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to go to the last slide here, and we want to address a couple of elephants in the room here. All right. So we are seeing on the media, the word recession every day. And some of you are, postponing starting the process because of the ghost of a recession. Yesterday, I was reading an article that starts to minimize the recession, the probability of recession. Other articles suggest that we are aiming to recession. Others suggest that we are in recession. So I will not try to speculate if we are approaching, in it, or past it, because we don't control that. I'm a big fan of control what you can control. So if you have a strong why you want to do this, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And I've been working a lot with Canadians. some people say that is just because of the weather, but that sometimes is not a very strong reason to do this huge effort of moving to another country, starting a business, apply for E2 visa. Let me give another example. I have a client from New Zealand we're currently working with. His parents live in the United States, have been living here for multiple years. He recently lost his father, so his mother is widowed right now. And this guy is well capitalized. He has the drive. He has the very strong why he wants to do this. And he's not concerned with recession. He's gonna eat recession for breakfast because he has the drive. He has a very strong reason to be here. So I invite you to check your why. Is your why strong enough? Because if it's not, then don't go. If you have a strong why, let's find options that work well in recession. Let's find options that use less of your budget. Let's make sure you are well capitalized before you start the journey. So there are ways we can work and create options for your consideration and still make that dream come true, as it happened with Bianca. Next topic here, Attorney Chung, would you like to talk about visa processing time? We hear a lot of different takes on visa processing times, depending on the embassy, depending on the country. What is your take here?
Thank you, Daniel. This is a very important topic. How long does the E2 visa application process take? And this is one of the top concerns for most E2 applicants. Well, the processing time varies, depends on the U.S. embassy in the country of your residence, because applicants have to apply with the U.S. embassy in your country of citizenship or resident. But generally speaking, before COVID, it typically took about a month, maybe 2 months, if the embassy is really busy, to process and adjudicate an E2 visa. Well, over the past 3 years, that processing time has basically completely gone out of whack because of all the shutdown and travel restrictions and COVID policies. Some of the U.S. embassy took over a year to process E2 visa in the past 2-3 years. But things have gotten a lot better last year and this year so far. Embassies have largely opened up, and they've worked through their backlog of E2 cases, and the processing times are getting shorter and shorter. Give you a case example, the U.S. consulate in Toronto, Canada handles all E2 visa for Canadians. In 2021, they were taking over a year to process E2 visa. That processing has precipitously come down to the current waiting time of roughly 3 months. So we're getting really close to how the processing time was before COVID, and may even get better. So depending on what country you're from, now most U.S. embassy around the world have opened up and are getting faster and faster with their visa processing. There are some countries where the U.S. embassy is still very slow and they're still backlogged. For example, U.S. embassy in Bogota, Colombia is extremely slow. In Chile, very slow. In Turkey, very slow. There are select U.S. embassy that are still very slow. Now, we have creative solution, alternative strategies for clients in that scenario. You know, all E2 applicants who are outside of the U.S. will need to come to the United States as a business visitor in order to make that investment, qualifying investment, before you're allowed to apply for an E2 visa. And although when you come into the United States as a visitor, you're not allowed to have any preconceived notions of changing visa status in the United States. U.S. immigration does expect the visitor to intend to leave the U.S. after you accomplish your investment business setup and then apply your visa with the U.S. embassy in your home country. But while you're staying in the U.S. as a business visitor, setting up the business, making your investment, when you get to the point where you completed your investment, you're ready to apply for the E2 visa. And then you discover with your attorney's advice that the U.S. embassy in your home country is taking a really long time. You are allowed to subsequent after your entry to change your mind and decide to apply what's called a change of status to E2 inside the United States. So that is a potential viable option. Of course, you can't formulate that intention before you come into the US. But if after entering, there are unforeseen changes in circumstance, such as the discovery of the US embassy taking unreasonable amount of time, you can then decide to apply for change of visa inside the US if you properly enter in a valid B1 visitor status. So that is an option for people from a country where the US embassy is still incredibly or very slow. You can do a change of status in the United States, and changing status also has an expedited option for an additional fee to immigration available to give you a much more reasonable, faster E2 visa decision so you can begin operating the business. But generally speaking, getting the visa, E2 visa from the US embassy in home country is more advantageous because it offers the potentially longer E2 visa with a travel permission if you get your E2 visa from the US embassy from your home country. But in select circumstances where it's appropriate, changing the status may be the alternative solution to get you the E2 visa authorization quicker. Daniel?
Great point. And this change of status has become quite useful during the peak of pandemic, where there were travel bans everywhere or super unreasonable quarantine requirements, depending on which border you had to cross. So we know a lot of people who actually ended up doing change of status during the peak of pandemic due to force majeure, and it worked well. So thank you very much for bringing this option as this opportunity as an option as well for select candidates. This is what we had to cover today. We invite you to click the link on the chat. Attorney Chung, if you can paste that link again, I would appreciate that. The landing page there is an option for you to download an E2 visa guide, and you're gonna see links. You can contact each one of our companies. We run completely independent companies. Attorney Chung runs his law practice. I run Franchise Wizards. We are a franchise consulting company. You're gonna see our contact information available in that landing page, and we look forward to hearing from you. If you want to discuss franchise opportunities, please reach out. As I mentioned before, the franchise consultation is free of charge. Is a risk-free approach for you to gain knowledge about franchise opportunities, and I would invite you to connect with me. Attorney Chung.
Thank you, Daniel, for the excellent presentation today. Audience, everybody, I'm very appreciative of you joining us today. I hope you got a lot of value from our presentation. And at the link, you can find the free guide as well as contact information. If you need to speak with me, reach out to me. Thank you again for joining us. I wish you guys a lovely day and much success on your journey.
Thank you all. Thank you, Attorney Chung. Thank you, Bianca. Thank you, Stephanie. Great to see you all. Bye-bye now.
Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.